And we are live streaming, so welcome everyone to the third event of the European Academy on Youth Work. Welcome everyone. We have a very enthusiastic crowd here in Kranjska Gora. Thank you for the spontaneous reaction, wink wink. And welcome as well to the online audience that we have today. You're very welcome to be with us. We don't see you, but please send your comments, your emojis, your reactions to the session today. And with no further ado, I want to present the session we're going to have. So this session will have a bit of interactive parts. So everybody in the room obviously is invited to participate, but also our audience online. If you have questions, comments, we have our digital facilitator waiting to read from you and to share with us your insights as well. There we go. I'm going to present. Oh, the presentation is already here. So the person that is going to speak now is an international affair analyst, a network weaver and a facilitator. And from the little bit I've met from her, she's somebody that sits on many tables where possible futures are discussed. Is that fair to say? Ladies and gentlemen, a big applause for Adanna Shallowe.
Hi everyone, good morning. Firstly, I want to start today with a moment of gratitude. I am so privileged and honored to speak to you this morning. And I just want to also say thank you for welcoming me into your community. I met so many of you yesterday. I participated in the session, and of course, we're in this glorious location. Sorry to those online, we're in this glorious location. And it's so amazing to be part of a community that is working towards making our future better and making the world a better place, as coy as it sounds. So thank you so much. This is incredibly formal, so when I feel nervous, I will come here, and when I feel more comfortable, I'll come here. So you'll pick that up, right? But we have about an hour and a half. There will be some interactive bits. We get to ask questions, but I will also be sharing some provocations with you as well. But before we start, I'm quite conscious that you may be sitting next to someone who you don't know. So I thought it would be good to introduce yourself by asking each other a question. What comes to mind when you think about the future? What about this side? What did y'all think about, when y'all think about the future, what comes to mind? Gloomy. Mixed feelings. Mixed feelings about fear and hope? Yeah, same. Too complex. The future?
Yes, and that makes them vulnerable.
Yes. Yes, because you get nervous, right? Afraid, maybe angry. The person who had the cat as the emotional support animal. Maybe we become a turtle. Sometimes turtles move quickly or move slowly, and then they get scared and they go into their shell and stay there for a while until they feel safe. For me, when I think about the future, I think about Timothy Chalamet. I feel like I'm among friends. I could share this with you. Timothy, I think about him. Maybe we'll meet sometime in the future. Actually, when I think about the future, I think about a lot of those movies that I grew up with that are situated in the future. Star Trek, Star Wars. And this year, I saw Dune in the cinema by Denis Villeneuve. if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. No spoilers. It is set in the future. It is set 8,000 years in the future. And when I was in the cinema, firstly, the first 10 minutes, jaw dropping, the thing I noticed was, yes, Timothy Chalamet looks great. But also, you begin to identify with his emotions, his motivations. You get into the story, you want them to win, or maybe you want them to lose. No spoilers. But the thing that movies, particularly stories, what they do is they transport us to a different time. And sometimes they show us what futures are possible. It also, very subtly, reminds us that some things that can happen in the future is actually happening right now. Right? And that's the scary part. Because me, hands greasy with popcorn, looking at Timothy Chalamet, was like, is that the future I want? I don't know. A well-known futurist said the purpose about thinking of the future is to disturb the present. And yesterday, we did a lot of exercises. When we did the game, we participated in a lot of exercises where we actually did futures work. You know, people hear futures and it sounds like a fancy term, but it really isn't. We started to explore new futures by coming up with different scenarios. We played the game. We played a role in the scenario, which is called archetypes. And we imagine ourselves, okay, if this is the future scenario and I am living in that future, what does it feel like? The thing about futures is that it's not about making predictions. Predictions are actually very, very dangerous because we don't know what the future holds. And the thing implicit in predictions is that there is an implicit bias towards certainty. And sadly, unfortunately, most of our education systems have trained us to think that the future is certain. You go to school, you graduate, you get a job, you stay in the job, you get promoted again, maybe, and then you retire, and then you relax on a beach afterwards, right? That's what's supposed to happen. But sadly, life is not like that. This is called linear thinking. That's a fancy term, but it's really linear thinking, that if you do A and it's followed by B, then C will naturally happen. That does not happen. Not in the real world. Futures, which is actually something that implicitly we as human beings are naturally able to do, we've just been trained out of it, is that we are able to think of a number of futures that are possible. It could be futures that are preferable, things that we want to have happen. It could be futures that we know is going to happen based on the information we have. So those things that are probable or plausible. And then there's those kind of crazy things that are very much impossible, but it could still happen. I could still meet Timothy Chalamet tomorrow, right? So what I want you all to do now, fun activity, I want you to look back over the last 10 years and think about those factors that has influenced youth work that comes to mind. You could come in your little groups again, in pairs or in threes. Think about those factors that have influenced youth work over the last 10 years. And you have about 5 minutes to do that. Go. You guys are awesome. Well done. Okay, our online audience said, in response to the question, what factors have influenced youth work over the last 10 years? They said the pandemic, technology, and migrations. That seems to have resonated with a lot of you. Ooh, there are more, sorry. Social and economic crisis, environmental changes, youth movements, and media developments. That's probably around social media, I guess. But Federica, if I'm wrong, please let me know. Great to hear from the audience in the room, your thoughts. I think we have some mics roving around. Anyone? Just raise your hand and a mic will come to you.
We also spoke about like the fact that in Ireland now, like youth work is more professionalised. So how this has had an impact. I'm only 25, but I graduated from school in 2017, and when I spoke to my guidance counsellor, they told me, and I said I want to be a youth worker. She's like, but that's not a job. Ooh. Yeah, she told me that's what volunteers do, and it's free. And I had a very full circle moment last year when I was invited back to the school to show one of our pieces of work to the whole school, and she was like, I remember when she came to me saying she wanted to be a youth worker, and look at her now, and I'm like, you told me that youth work wasn't real. So I think the fact of the professionalism and that kind of structure within Ireland now has made a big difference on us as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more thing we talked about is about the changes in politics and the people in power. Because although youth work it's supposed to be apolitical stuff, we still need to educate active citizens, but also changes in the people in power, it affects the policies, the funding, everything. Like from my perspective in Varna, which was European Youth Capital 2017, once the mayor changed, everything died in our city. And on a national level, things are not very pink too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I saw a lot of nodding heads. Anybody else?
There's one more contribution
Probably
there
at the back.
and one there.
Ooh.
So two
Fergal.
more. We start with Fergal and then Nick. We're gonna
and
ask
if you can just stand up, it's easier for the
Exactly.
camera also. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, it's working. Yeah, the one word that came to mind for me when you asked the question was corporatization, and about youth work. I'm around long enough to remember youth work without social media, without technology, and without all the nice fancy displays and sound studios and Eurovision-esque kind of stuff, when it was just about the practitioner and the young person, you know, and the relationship. So for me, youth work, which is also a symptom of the idea of trying to survive, youth work has had to prove itself continuously. And, you know, the word recognition now has been around. I'm kind of always thinking, when does youth work become recognized? Actually, when does it actually happen? Because the conversation has been going on quite some time. So the idea of being very business-esque and very corporatization, and the idea of just that there's continuously trying to be something that has to prove itself, which is also about the lack of funding and the lack of resources. But sometimes we become a monster in ourselves, and we don't reflect on that kind of thing. We forget about maybe the priorities become less about practice. One of the things I was saying in the conversation here is that Erasmus, as much as it's beautiful and wonderful, has often created this situation where people become career youth workers, they become career trainers, they become career facilitators, career mentors and career coaches, and we never have any of those conversations. So apart from all the obvious external factors that are happening outside, one thing that wasn't mentioned was populism. I don't think it was mentioned so far. So for me, the word corporatization, business, about a profession that was always based on the relationship, the voluntary relationship between the young person and the practitioner, and the beauty of that, it's become very slick now. I mean, look around the room, and it's so slick. And I'm conscious in saying that, and it's not a criticism of what it is, but it's that idea. Sometimes we forget what we've actually, where we've come from, and the importance and the value of that, as opposed to how we look and how it looks to everyone else outside. So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mike's coming, Mike's coming. We start with this gentleman and then we come to this young lady.
Hi, Nick here.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah, I started off with the list of crises, which often the European Union is putting onto youth work to be the resolution to every crisis. And then after I had a very long list of crises from the last 10 years, which I think more or less all have been mentioned already, I was then thinking, yeah, but who else influences youth work? And then I was thinking actually about, this is the third one of these events, this influences youth work. The European Youth Work Agenda, the conventions, and then it was like, yeah, and the youth workers. And then to my shame, finally, my final piece that I wrote was actually the young people influence youth work. And I thought about the young people last, unfortunately.
Thank you.
That's okay. This is a brave, safe space.
Hi. So I would talk about the context in North Africa, especially in Morocco. So one of the factors that we notice every NGO followed is we looking for funds, obviously. So there is criterias, and it was a trend. So 5 years ago, a lot of things were going for politics and media, disinformation. So every NGO worked on that because the criteria of the funding was like, if you wanted money, you could do this, and through last years, we were working with climate. So every NGO is doing climate justice, environment. So yeah, so it was it's in a way a good thing because environment needs our attention and some restriction, but also it's a negative factor because if I want to work about tolerance or peace or culture, now it's not a good time because the funding are they refuse. And I would say yeah, it's good to have a path like a mutual one that we could, but also not eliminate other because tolerance, peace, it's very important. And now if you can apply, you get no answer. So it's one of the factors.
Thank you.
Should I go
ahead.
first?
Sorry, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What I can say, what influenced my work with young people are two things. 10 years ago, they came with a plan and, for example, they volunteered because it helps them to fulfill their plan. Nowadays, they feel lost. They have 10,000 of opportunities, but leave school, leave university, not knowing what to do in life, in job. So it's my duty to help them to find their way and feel more secure about themselves and not doubt themselves. And I think there's a lot of pressure on them being special, having to be super interesting, super cool, super funny, super beautiful or something. So these are the two pressures. Find your way in life and be special to get any attention. So a lot of pressure on young people nowadays. And the other factor is, what I see, which I'm very proud of, is they finally woke up. 10 years ago, they were apolitical. And, I thought, hey, you have to wake up, because if you don't do something, you wake up in a future you don't like. So you need to do something about it. And I have to say, Greta Thunberg was the turning point. And now you see a lot of young political activists, and we need to support them and not stop them.
We take two more comments, one in the front and one in the back.
Hi, Diana from Armenia. I think we talked about lots of things, but I want to mention the factor of wars and conflict, also because coming from the eastern part of Europe, we cannot not talk about this. So I think youth workers also focus a lot on the mental well-being of youth, and also among ourselves as the rehabilitation, because this trauma and big influence had on young people and their mental well-being. I think youth work now kind of profiled itself also to be as an emotional support mechanism in the region and also in all over the Europe. So I think this influenced a lot to rethink and to reflect everything that we did was actually needed for young people for this trauma and healing all of that problems. Yeah.
Thank you.
One last one.
Hi, Katja from Germany. Two observations. The one is we have growing opportunities of participation for young people, and we reach quite a lot of young people, well educated normally. And I mean, we have elections, and they are allowed to go to the poll by 16, from 16 years old. But on the other hand, involving them is like a bit like preaching the converted from my point of view. There's still a majority of young people that are lost and that we do not reach, even if we try to. And I'm in sorrow about this big group of young people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it was really good to listen to everybody's insights. I know that it resonated with people because as soon as someone started to talk, there was a lot of and yes and yeah, that is yeah. Which is good. It means that there's something someone said that we recognize and could relate to. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at those factors that will influence youth work in the next 10 years. So we're going to look forward. So go in your groups, have about 5 minutes to chat, and we'll come back again. Okay? Go. I'm going to give you all a gold star. Well done. How was that? It's good. So some of the comments from our online audience include, oh, I have to get my glasses, can't see that. The climate emergency. Yeah? That's a long list. Policy directions, global needs, climate, energy, changes to the education system, hopefully. No, that's not even my comment. That's what a person said. Climate change, war, climate migrations, AI, of course, pops up all the time. In some places, especially in rural areas, the aging of the population. Yeah? Yeah. So, what about the audience in the room? It'd be great to get some feedback. I'll start at the back. I felt I had a front bias, so I apologize. We start at the back. Are there any comments at the back? Want to share? No? No? Ah, sorry, didn't see you.
Please stand up. Share your name. Yes.
So we actually spoke up also about we tell us a joke yesterday with older work. So we spoke about it. Of course, we have to focus on the youngsters. But as we said, we have less youth people than older people, and we have to consider also that part. We cannot just work on the youth and raise awareness about what they have, the possibilities they have, but also work with the others part of the people. So I met some parents that doesn't allow the kids to go on voluntary service because they're afraid of whatever. So we have to work also on the community.
Yes.
Just so on the same part, of course, different methods we said, but we have to work on both sides.
Yeah.
Good morning. Several things, maybe simple. Attention span narrowing down.
Yeah.
10 years ago, we could have them for a session 2, 3 training. Now we need to think of different things. And then talking about different things, Gen Z youth workers, who are they, what they're doing, how they're doing. So this is also something to think about. And then there's a huge gap right now between generations of youth workers and professionals as well, and the things that are happening in the real life of the young person globally, and how they perceive things. And I think this is something that we would have to address immediately to have better next 10 years.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question though? When you say Gen Z youth workers, you mean recruiting Gen Z youth
Exactly.
workers? Okay. Yeah,
It's
okay.
also about peer learning and
Yeah.
things that what's going on right now. In 10 years, these people will run the show.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Where Valerie and I were talking about the factor that can influence youth work or might influence is trust. A lot of young people are protesting right now in the streets while decisions are made for them. But youth work focuses on strengthening a lot of competences, and we have to trust that our young people can really make a difference. So don't forget to invite them on a political level and not leave them on the streets.
I feel I have on this side. Any comments? Any insights? No? Anybody?
And here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Who's faster?
Hi, thank you. I'm Fabiola from Italy. And I think that COVID had caused a problem about, I wake up, hi. A problem about relationships with young people, in scholar years. And actually, young people doesn't meet each other in the streets and doesn't go out. And they're having online relationships. I think that we as youth workers needed to habitate the spaces that young people are habitating right now. And I think that we need to have a huge part of our future job in the digital stuff, using AI and using digital tools, and learning how to do actually digital youth work, not only with Padlet, but with other tools that we can create with digital scientists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ira. I think one more thing that might influence it quite a bit is the labor market shift. It is by research said that we expect in the next few years a different labor market shift as well, where most probably the latest research also says that people will not be hired based on their academic background, but on the skills. And there goes soft skills coming back into play, where youth work has been for ages influencing. So we might be even more needed into the labor market redraw to put young people into it. Not forgetting that the new trends of the labor market are also completely new. The jobs that Gen Z is inventing for themselves. That we also have to upskill and reskill ourselves in a way to be able to do that with them.
Very true.
Thank you.
Final two. One in the back and Foucault. Either one.
Okay, we spoke a couple of things, some of the things mentioned about technology and AI, and also funding, of course. Youth work can't survive without funding. Honest conversations about migration. I mean, the history of humanity has always been about migration and moving, and politics not having been honest with their populations about people will be on the move, and particularly around the climate crisis. People can't live in 45, 50 degrees without water and without resources. So that's one thing. Connected to the conference in Weimar, I was also there, so it was about critical youth work. And it's the unconference, I should say, just for the record. About this idea of when youth works, when does it stop being impartial? And as youth workers, we have to be impartial and try and kind of provide opportunities for people to make informed decisions. But as a community, when do we get our angry face on about the stuff that is going on? And that's the challenge. How do you reconcile that? How do you balance that between trying to service this idea of being impartial and helping young people to make informed decisions, and then also looking around you and thinking about things, all the things that you've mentioned. I mean, no one has mentioned also what's going on in the Middle East right now, but also what's happened in the last few years. So it's that idea of, I suppose, taking positions, at what point, but then the risk is you lose the funding and so on. So we have to think about those things that are coming in terms of how it will youth work questions they need to reconcile and how to answer those questions. So,
Thank you, Fergal. Last comment from the back.
Hello there, Hilary from Ireland. I'm conscious we've had a few Irish voices this morning. I mean, the thing is that strikes me is that youth work will be influenced by whatever is happening in the world. That has always been the way. Like, youth work was not invented by young people. Youth work was invented by adult society in some way to address, you know, different things. So either the problems that young people have, the problems that young people are, the problems that young people are causing. And so we have to be realistic about that. Youth work has never been in charge of its own destiny, I don't think. But I think that there are things in that we can work together around to in some way fulfill, because I think youth work makes a promise to young people. Fundamentally, through all of the differences over all of the years. So whether the focus has been on employment, because there's big issues of employment, or it's been to do with migration, or it's been to do with, you know, peace and reconciliation, or young people not in education and training and employment, like, we're always subject to those sort of political impacts. And I think we need to, as I said, not be naive about that. But if we think about the promise that we make to young people, fundamentally, which is around that they will experience something different in their relationships with youth workers than they experience in the rest of their lives, that they will be listened to, that their voices will be heard, that they will in some way be supported in an educational practice to have those voices amplified, that they will be supported to have agency in the world. Those are the things I think we need to organise about, not so much about the threat of AI or the migration or even what's happening in the Middle East, because those things will all continue on around us. And I think for me, the big question is, how do we, as practitioners and educational practitioners, engage with young people in ways that are meaningful for them and support them to make those decisions? And I disagree with Fergal. I don't think we're neutral. Education is never neutral. Youth work isn't neutral. Our values of participation, respect, empowerment, a concern for human rights, those are not neutral. Those put us in a particular space. And I think the tension that we're always going to have in youth work is, how do you hold that line? How do you hold that line? And how do you stay in existence in the context where the states, in their recognition of youth work, are more interested in what youth work can deliver for the state than youth work as an independent practice in ourselves? And that's the bit that we can collectively organise about and activate a community of practice to hold on to those sort of principles and figure out how we do that together.
That's really hard to follow. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for that activity that we did. I hope it was helpful for you. Looking back 10 years, looking at the progress, because there have been some, and then looking forward, what is coming in the future. What we did just now, this is really tricky. What we did, it was really examine those emerging trends and events that can influence the future of something. And that is called looking at the drivers of change. And this slide was a slide that I and several colleagues, including Alex, who's in the room right now, Alex and I worked on a research report called Stitch in Time. And we did that report in the midst of the pandemic. We literally kicked it off in March 2020, and it was published in around September 2020. And we came up with these drivers of change, and we sort of put it in these different buckets. Environmental crisis, aging, we spoke about aging, centrality of technology, that's never gonna go away, it seems. And then we talked about different wildcard disruptors. Obviously, at that time, we were dealing with many different, a conflation of drivers happening at the same time. There was the pandemic, plunged the world in an economic crisis. And then during that same year, there were floods, wildfires everywhere. Literally, the world felt like it was on fire. And those were things that we thought would never happen. Those are the impossible events, the Timothy Chalamet moments, if you will. But now, if you had to look at that slide, some things look relevant and some things don't look relevant, right? And you'll probably add war, conflict, and many other different trends that we are seeing that will affect our future. And you're right. There are those macro, and I would think these are those kind of macro drivers that are happening globally that will affect us all. And there's actually those micro localized drivers that are happening in your community, in your country, in your region, that you also need to pay attention to. And this is an exercise, what we just did, you all could do with your own team, in your own organizations, in your own communities of practice. So as I said this morning, foresight is the capacity to think systematically about the future using a toolbox of methods and approaches. And there are many. That's not my job today. I'm not going to go through all the approaches that we could use. But actually, you all used approaches yesterday. We did scenario planning. We looked at archetypes. We did role playing. We did horizon scanning. We did horizon scanning just now. The trick is, and there are many, these are all that I could think of. And this is actually all put together by a well-known futurist called Weldie Schultz. She talks about them as the jigsaw of methods. It kind of doesn't matter. You may have a preference for a particular method, but if you need to hang a picture in your house, in your home, you would look for a hammer and you look for a nail, right? Choose the method or methods that are relevant to the thing that you are trying to achieve. So if there's something that you're worried about, maybe do some horizon scanning. If there's a goal or vision of a preferred future that you want to have happen, then do some visioning, do some strategic management. If there's something that you think, man, these wildcard moments are likely to happen, maybe do some scenario planning. What if we don't have funding next year? God forbid. What would we do then? Look at alternative measures, exactly. And that is exactly what futures thinking and futures method and foresight, they all have big names, but that is exactly what it means. I wanted, instead of going through the different methods, I wanted to come up with some examples that you may identify with of other organizations and entities using futures and what happened. One is an amazing initiative in California. Any Americans in the room? No? Americans? No. Amazing initiative in California. California is one of the most populous states in the United States of America. And California 100 was a transformative statewide initiative where they tried to imagine what California will be in the next 100 years. Hence, California 100. And it was incubated by the University of California and Stanford University. And what they did was employed an army of researchers, came up with scenarios for 15 policy areas, housing, health, environment, etc. And they generated those scenarios for politicians to use in order to have more radical, more evidence-based policy. The thing that they did that I was really drawn to was the fact that they recruited over 1,000 youth activists as part of the initiative. And they also formed a coalition of fellows, futures fellows on different campuses, came up with a futures manifesto, a youth futures manifesto for the future, and they also put together the first Youth Futures Summit. I thought that was amazing because they were doing very high policy things, but really they involved the young people to be an integral part of it. And the thing is, as well, if you read all the documents, they're all available online, they all start off with the intention of what they wanted to do. They wanted the California next century to be rooted in equity, in sustainability, and innovation. They were very clear. Another amazing example comes from Japan, where an economist in the town of Yahaba brought together a group of citizens to debate a particular policy. It was what you would call a citizens' assembly. And what they did was They took all the citizens that gathered and split them in two. One half represented citizens of the time, and at that time it was the year 2015. And they took the other half, and they were supposed to be citizens of the year 2060. Imagine that. And they basically debated the same policy that they were debating, but from two different perspectives. And what was the result was that the present-day citizens decided to invest in the future citizens of that particular town. Hence, future design movement. That, what happened in 2015 has now spread across Japan. There's a future strategy office in the town of Yahaba right now. And a lot of other countries have adopted this model. Some split it in half. Some decide, okay, one day we'll just talk about the policy from the perspective of the present day. And another day we'll just talk about it from the perspective of being a citizen in 2060, 2050, 2040. That actually, just as a sidebar, that actually became one method that was very key in a lot of the climate assembly movements in different parts of the world. In Belgium, I believe also in France, I know in Ireland, and in Scotland. So what's the point? What's the point of futures? We talk about the future, things happen, and then what? Do we go back to our status quo? No. The point of futures is to, as the futurist said that I mentioned earlier, is to disturb the present. And to disturb the present, we actually have to challenge our existing assumptions. Explore new and alternative futures, play in what is possible, and take action. That's the most important part. Because it doesn't matter if we dream about meeting Timothy Chalamet unless we make plans for it. Sorry, I'm bringing him up a lot. Please don't report me. So it's key to take action. But I'm very sensitive. It's very easy for me to stand up on the stage and say, y'all can take action, it's easy. Especially when you want to take action about the future when the present is very challenging. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to argue with that. That is a reality that we all have to live with. But what is really important is that you recognize that there's a tension between the two. I think we all do in this room. But it's important that we know what is driving our short-term loop, whether it's, somebody mentioned it this morning, politics and electoral cycles, the digital age and digital distraction, and being consumed with what is happening now. I myself have a TikTok brain. Beyond 5 minutes, sometimes I don't know what I'm saying. And then also, there's an overarching system that we are part of. This drive to grow, this drive to make profit in the short term. These are powerful drivers that keep us in a short-term mindset. But I would encourage you to also make space for a long-term mindset. Some projects are long-term by nature. If you're in construction and you build a bridge, a road, a tunnel underneath the English Channel, that you don't think about that in short term. It's not a year project. It's not a month-long project. It's decades long. And this image comes from a book called The Good Ancestor. Some of you may know it, by Roman Krasnarek. And he talks about cathedral thinking. Long term, we're going to build this thing brick by brick for the next 10, 20 years, so that the generation in the year, 20 years from now, will be able to benefit. That is what that is. And actually, when you think about it, we are all products of some great decisions some of our ancestors made. We all get to reap the benefits. And the key is for us to pass that along. A really good way to sort of conflate the short-term loop and the legacy future mindset is to kind of hold all three things at the same time, which is a bit tricky. And one method or tool or model that you can use is known as the 3 horizons model. I'll try to explain it now. So the Three Horizons model tried to hold three different times at the same time. So you're dealing with the present, which is H1, what is happening now. And the thing with the H1 horizon is that you know what is happening now. It is familiar, it is the status quo, but it's not fit for purpose. Right now, the cracks are starting to show. And then you have Horizon 3, which is the future you want to envision, this amazing thing that you want to have happen 5, 10 years down the line. And that's the thing that you of yourself want to work towards. And then you have Horizon 2. Horizon 2 is actually the interesting and creative bit. That's fancy words for challenging. Horizon 2 is where you decide, okay, there's stuff happening now that I don't like, so I'm going to get rid of those things. There's stuff happening now that I do like, so I'm going to try and keep those things. And there are things that I really want to try, things that I really want to experiment, that I want to dedicate some time to. Some colleagues of mine always say, in that period of time, Horizon 2, which is the arena of transformation, we are watering the seeds and getting rid of the weeds. So when we talk about the future, it's important we recognize who's the we. Who's the we? Me, you, us? It's important to know when we have the conversations within our organizations, we recognize who is managing those conversations, who is in the room physically, and who's not in the room. Who's allowed to participate and who cannot participate. Maybe because they're not even born as yet, the future generations. In order for any futures exercise to be considered legitimate, it is important for us to ensure that they are inclusive, that they represent diverse perspectives, and oftentimes they come from the outside in. Because sometimes when you're in the middle of something, I know this happens to me, when I'm in the middle of something, I can't see the wood from the trees, like it's too complicated. But when you involve as many people as possible, you're able to sort of recognize your blind spots and recognize the gaps that could happen. So important to know that every single voice matters. Every single voice matters. You have to make space for experts and researchers, because that's incredibly important. But it's also good to use non-experts, and that might sound controversial, but that was something a futurist from Canada told me that he did. Policy Horizon Canada, which is the foresight agency of the national government, use non-experts in some of their futures exercises. And what he said was what I just said. Non-experts are able to recognize the blind spots that you yourself have. So sometimes it's important, and that may sound controversial, but it could be those who are adjacent to the project, but not in the project. You understand what I mean? Those who are like 2 or 3 degrees of separation from our project. Obviously, this is youth work, so we really want to embed young people as part of the process. We want to involve future generations as well, hopefully. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that we must also recognize the power dynamics that could happen when we're having these conversations. And I would encourage you to try and disturb and invert those power dynamics. I was on a project once with a colleague, and what they did was really funny. They did like a role-playing exercise. We did like a futures thing. I think we had to do some scenarios, and we had to play roles. But they made the senior management played the role as the customer, and customers played the role as the senior management. By disturbing those hierarchies, you're able to expose the cracks in the system, but also allow some of the management to understand the process and the project from a different perspective. That's also a good tip. It's important also, as I said before, to think about those who are not able to participate due to societal barriers. And I know this is difficult because sometimes those communities are hard to reach. And for many reasons, particularly around trust issues, they don't want to participate. That just means we have to work really hard to get them involved. It may mean encouraging using, I don't like to use the word, but like using gatekeepers or those people who are closer to those communities to get involved. It may mean a longer lead time in terms of engagement with those communities because those communities are used to somebody coming in, drop, helicopter in, and then helicopter out, and they're gone. So it will require to build trust. That's a very difficult thing to do in 2024. But it requires us to build trust with those communities so that they become involved as part of the process. And as I said before, include future generations as part of the exercise. I know I mentioned it when I talk about young people as part of the process, but the future generations is a different kind of thing because those future generations may not even be in existence as yet. We don't know what they will face in the year 2060. But in order to sort of give a litmus test to some of the processes we are putting in place now, sometimes you have to think, okay, will this benefit a future generation? Like in the next 10 years? You don't have to think 2060, that seems way far, but in the next 10 years or the next tranche of people coming in to experience the activities, your youth work activities, how would they benefit? How could we build an infrastructure and an architecture that will ensure that those people, that the process will be in existence and that generation will be able to benefit? It's incredibly important. By the way, I should say, it's fancy for me to say include future generations. That is something indigenous communities have been doing for centuries and millennia. So I'm just borrowing from the wisdom of indigenous communities globally. I'll end where I began, around the idea of the power of storytelling. I talked about movies. I won't mention his name, but I talked about movies. And I wanted to build out some notes because this was really important to me to talk about today. Some work that we did when I was with another organization, we worked with a well-known narrative change expert and system change expert, Ella Saltmarsh. And she talked about stories in 3 ways. Stories as light, story as glue, story as web. She said story as light helps us to expose things when they're not working. It shows the cracks. It helps us to identify outliers and illuminate an individual's experience within a wider context. Stories can make visible alternative or possible futures. Story as glue. Storytelling has a very powerful ingredient. It helps community build empathy. We talk about collective visions of the future when we can help build a shared sense of purpose, something that we could collectively work towards. And oftentimes, when you're working within your own organization, we talk about mission-driven teams and mission-driven organizations. Really, what we're talking about is how we can galvanize activity, interest, sweat equity around a story. And then there's story as web. And for me, this is where futures are really important. Stories are woven through everything we are and are part of everything that we do. And oftentimes, they're invisible to us because, like a spider's web, they are part of our society. They are in our cultural and societal norms. And they become unidentifiable. So part of the work when we do futures, and particularly when we get to stories, we have to expose the stories we live by and hold that mirror to us and allow us to author new stories. Ultimately, for me, the future is a story we tell ourselves, and hopefully we decide what that future will be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adanna. I know what many of you are thinking. Yes, the PowerPoint will be shared later on, so you will get it as well. We know that some of the tables were a little bit small for the background there, but you're going to get all the information. And now we have a few minutes for Q&A. So if there's any questions in the audience for Adanna, please bring them on. We're going to have time for maybe 2-3 questions, depending on how complex they are. So, any questions?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, can you say your name, please?
Yes.
That's okay as well.
Hi, I'm Hind from Morocco. And my question is, as we talked about trends, and one of the participants was saying that we have to skill ourselves because AI, education, and from experience, I was in college 2 years ago, and we had different lessons and modules, and we went to the markets, and now our degree is not useful, and so as a youth worker. In our countries, we work with degrees. Yeah, you don't work like this. You have to have a degree, and the university is adapting. So I saw the modules of this year. We had the digitals. We have how to use AI. So yeah, maybe these students will have a chance. But what about the generations that my generation that went and the trends happened? So you don't have actually any degrees or how to use skills because you're fighting with time. So I'm not supposed to go to college 4 years again and every time is doing the same thing. And as a youth worker, first we struggle finding jobs. And let me just say that I was surprised you guys getting paid for your job in Morocco. We don't get paid. I'm everyone is getting paid, huh? I do it for free. I was it's not, for us it's voluntary. And yes, a few of them, yes, but it's this problem, you are fighting with time and with constant trends, and there is generation after generation and employment. So how can we fix this? Maybe if you have a tool that we can use, an alternative, as you mentioned, if the trends happen, what's happening to the oldest generation? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. I think the way I would answer it is, in order to respond to, because you're looking for trends to better support the community you work with, right? The young people that you work with. You don't have to do it all on your own. I think what I rely on is the networks that I have within my community to tell me what the trends are. I don't actually know what the trends are. Sometimes you can read reports and they have what trends that people need to be on top of. Sometimes governments, I don't know how it is in Morocco, but governments may publish different reports around trends that they see happening in labor market or in the aging population, or now everybody is talking about AI. Those things could be important, but really it's about what's important to you. So I would recommend working with other colleagues in your particular organization, thinking about if you have time, if there's a meeting that happens on a regular basis, that you talk about what each of you are seeing in terms of what are the emerging patterns and how those different things that you're seeing can affect the young people. Because really, it's about what's relevant to your community and to the people that you're serving, the beneficiaries you're serving, rather than what's happening in England or what's happening in Ireland or wherever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Oh.
questions
We
in the
have
back.
4, actually. But
I feel weird standing up here. I feel like...
Thank you for the presentation. I'm Özge from Turkey. I feel a little bit unfair that I take to mic because we will be presenting our report tomorrow. So it's not a question, but a kind request from you to elaborate more on the conflictual futures, because there are so many nations, so many countries here. And as Hild from Morocco was comparing what is desirable and what is probable in one country can be a disaster or contradictory, improbable story in another nation, technology, demography, or environment. So I would like to hear your view on this contradicting and potentially conflicting futures at a nation's level or an international level. There's not one future for all humanity. Somebody's gain might be somebody's loss.
Yeah. Are you talking specifically around the report? Because I don't want to comment on the report that you're doing.
No report, just you.
So there's different global macro, what we call macro trends, right? There are things that we're always going to be talking about on a global level. We will be talking about climate change. We will be talking about aging populations, particularly in Europe. We will be talking about migration as a result of climate change, or even migration as a result of conflict. That will happen. I think you have to think about how do you zoom in and how do you zoom out. So some of those trends will be particularly acute in particular regions. We mentioned the Middle East, Eastern Europe, etc. this morning. So those trends around conflict and peace will be particularly acute to those regions. Whereas in other countries, there are other trends. In my country, we're dealing with a phenomenon known as Brexit and the implications of that. That's very specific to the United Kingdom. England. Very, very specific. So that will be something that persons in my country will be talking about. You don't have to resolve, the futures don't have to come together. The national and the global doesn't have to come together. What you need to remember is always try and figure out what question are you trying to answer? What's the scope, to use a research term? What's the scope of interest? If you're speaking towards a community in south of London, that's very local, very hyper. Things like climate change and stuff may not be relevant. But as long as you identify what's your scope and who's the audience that is digesting the information, who's receiving the research, who will act on the research, then you'll be able to identify, okay, this trend is actually more relevant than others. It's a prioritization. And over time, certain things will evolve. For example, a conflict in a particular part of the world may lead to refugees, may lead to refugees entering a particular country and then affecting that particular community in the south of London. Like you have to see the different impacts over time, because a trend may have a particular impact in the present, but then if you look in the short term and the long term, 5-10 years down the line, those trends may become more acute and may result in the community being more affected. So it kind of depends on who's the audience, what question you're trying to ask or answer, and who will be receiving the information. Hope I answered your question, Oski.
Thank you. Anita? Yeah.
Okay, hello. I'm Hannah from Austria. I will take a bit of practical point of view. I found it very interesting what you told us, and I think one specific part of being a youth worker or working in the youth field is, on the one hand, as a practitioner, you work a lot with young people, and on the other hand, you have to present their interests to people who give the funding, to politicians, so you're always between the two worlds. And for me, the question was, like, I'm a lot in the situation that I have an idea, or I know I need more money to do some development or something, so I have to go to the politicians who have the money and have to present it understandable for them. Why it would be very necessary and very good for everyone to give more money so we can, I don't know, do or develop something in the future. So I was really interested from your point of view, if you have a good tip for us practitioners, what kind of method would help for us to really bring this reality we all have to the politician side or to funding, to the people who do the decisions about funding?
Those are tough questions. Couple of things come to mind. So one cool thing that we did yesterday with the game was a very fun, exciting way to introduce an idea or to get you in the frame of mind of thinking about futures, right? And I think what was really helpful in that is it lowered the barrier in terms of accessibility for everybody to participate. And I think that's a really good way to start off. Try as much as possible to make sure that whatever you're doing is accessible for a lot of people to understand. Because I think when we have to put together funding proposals or it's in a particular language, what helps is if the funding partners or the politicians can see or experience what you're doing. So inviting them on activities, I know that is a difficult thing because sometimes they don't turn up, but inviting them to come along to activities or even showing them what happened in those activities, where the money is going. Another good way in terms of doing like a futures exercise with funders is to bring artifacts. A lot of people use AI and visual reality, those sort of fancy goggles and technology to do that. But you can also do it in a very tactile way. You can actually say, okay, this is what this will look like in 10 years. And you could build like a model. That might be a fun thing to do. Or even you could have some sort of workbook or physical object that you say, but this is something that the young people could use in this activity if we get the funding to do that. Because you're trying to make the thing that doesn't happen yet real to the people who are going to fund it. So I would encourage you, I am not a big digital person, but if you could do that, that's great. But if you can visualize, make them experience it, make them touch and feel it so that you have these sort of artifacts that they will be able to immerse themselves into the activity that you're proposing. That's something that I will also encourage. And lastly, and you all may do this already, always have them face a young person who have gone through the program you're going. Because it's very, very hard for a politician smiling and ensuring that people get votes, for them to dismiss a young person who's a beneficiary of their program in the room at the time. There was a question. Oh, yeah. Giselle.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Giselle. It's not so much about tips and tricks or even youth work, but about a few references you made to ancestors in your presentation. And we used indeed in the report that will be presented tomorrow the future foresight methodology, which is still quite linear in a way. So I was wondering, in your experience, when you work on futures and looking at the future as a non-linear, process, have you experienced also other way to approach futures that look backwards as well, or not? Or look at the stories from the past, because Gaston Berger says that the purpose of future thinking is to disturb the present, but I think it also disturbs the past. So I would be happy to hear your thoughts about that.
That's a good one. I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but I think a couple of things that we did in some futures exercises was, if you had to update something that we use, what would it look like? So if you had to update like the wheel, something as kind of banal as the wheel, would you come up with the same thing or would it be different? And that's like a good icebreaker thing, because it makes us think, oh, maybe it was perfect all along, like it needs no improvements. And the learning from that is, oh, maybe there's some things that we're doing now that are actually good as it is. It's just to build on it so that, or to protect it. Find structures to protect the thing that we're doing so that it does not get destroyed. But you gave me some food for thought. I need to come up with a better answer. I'll think about it and come back to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're not going to have any more time for more questions, but Adanna is still with us until the end of the event?
Till Friday, yeah.
Till Friday. So I'm making herself available if you want to chit-chat. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adanna. Thank you so much. I need my notes. This was really wonderful. What a great way to help us think how to think about the future and how to consider the future and future generations in our decision-making processes now. So the day is going to continue. We're going to have coffee break now, but there's a few things I want to tell you. So first thing, after coffee break, the forums start. Yes? So you can to pick the session you want to go to, and these forums, 2 of them are going to take place here, 2 of them take place on the 4th floor. In the app, you can find the themes, who's presenting it. Some of them are more workshops, more like hands-on, and some of them are more presentations of practices with a debate, obviously, about those practices. We will show them here, I guess. Soon they're going to appear. Also letting you know that lunch, we're going to have lunch in the restaurant. And because we are a big group, we encourage people to kind of informally create 2 shifts. If you want to go for a walk a little, if you're not too hungry, you can go for a walk and then start. Otherwise, there's going to be an endless line. So maybe think about not all be there at 1 to start lunch. And in the afternoon, there's going to be a second round of forums. I just need the clicker. Do you have it? Is it here? Do I have it? Sorry, I should have asked it. Thanks. Yes. So these are the first forums that are taking place now from 11:30 to 1. Yes. I will leave this slide here so you can make choices if you haven't yet. And after, from 2:30 to 4, these are the forums happening. Okay? But I'll now put back the first one. So this is the first choices you have now for the sessions of 11:30 to 1 are these. We're going to meet back here after the afternoon coffee break, which takes place at 4, so we meet here at 4:30. Okay? We're just going to have a short gathering here just to present you the rest of the activities and to kind of sum us up together. Yes, Darko wants to add something. I also want to add something. I just want to say, for all you turtle holders, bring them back to the nest here. We'll need them for the other sessions. Oh, you can kiss them. Darko?
Yes, and not to forget the online audience. We would like to thank you all for being with us and watching this on YouTube or other social media. And make sure that actually you join the live streaming sessions tomorrow. And now we wave to the online audience. Wave!
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. Have a nice coffee break and enjoy your forums.